Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sacred Symbols Plus. I'm your host for today, Dustin, and this is a mailbag all about my recent trip to Japan. And I was very honored to see so many people asking for an entire episode dedicated to this. I wasn't necessarily expecting to do something like that, but I'm happy to do it. And what's especially interesting is just seeing how many of our listeners have been either just went to Japan or are currently in Japan or going to Japan in the next few months. Obviously, tourism right now to Japan is super big since they just opened up, I want to say in the last 6 months. So there's been a crazy tourism boom over there. And so I know many of you are interested. And so, yeah, I tried to pack in as many tips and tricks into this video as possible. I'm a little distracted. I have Frisk on my lap right now, and she is, if you're watching the video, you can see she's just incessantly licking my arm, which is a very normal occurrence for her. But we're going to keep her around for now, as long as you're not too annoying. But this is basically a grab bag of a million different things that you guys asked over on Patreon. There was a ton of questions, a lot of really good ones. And so yeah, we'll go through these, and I'm sure there will be a bunch of side tangents and different things to talk about along the way. But let's go ahead and hop into it, because I have 5 pages of questions, but some of them I don't plan to take super long on, but I want to fit in as many as possible. So let's go ahead and kick it off with Cade O'Brien, who says, "Glad you had fun on your trip. As someone who is interested in traveling to Japan, I'm curious how you did with the language barrier. I'm interested when it comes to communicating and reading menus/signs." So yeah, this is something that I think I knew. I had seen that most people don't speak English in Japan beforehand. I know that some people, you go there and you stay in the very touristy areas. Maybe you'll see more people that speak English, but seriously, barely anybody spoke English when I was there. And I think part of that too is just that for most of the nights we weren't in a hotel, we were in Airbnb, and we'll get to that later. So we didn't even interact in a normal touristy way in a lot of different places. So yeah, very, very few people spoke English. Some people could maybe say a few words or phrases when you're checking out somewhere or something like that, like, do you need a bag or whatever. But so you would think that would make things really, really difficult. But what I found in my 10 days there is that Japan was extremely accommodating to people that did not speak Japanese, and that it was way easier than I thought to get around and buy stuff and order from different places. A lot of the places I went to had English menus, not all of them. Some people on YouTube will say, like, oh, if it has an English menu, then it's for tourists, it's touristy. And I guess that could be true in some sense, but a lot of the places I went to that had an English menu did not feel touristy at all, still had servers that did not speak English, and they also weren't, jacking up the price or anything because it was tourist friendly. So I would recommend, if you're going to try out, do a few months of Duolingo, or at least learn some basic phrases, because those little phrases can go a very, very long way in just a little bit of basic interaction. Holly did about 6 or 7 months of Duolingo, and she's by no means, I would say, she doesn't know a ton of Japanese, but she knew just enough that a few different times she was asked if she spoke Japanese, and the media was like, no. Like, I know just enough to have this current interaction. So having those phrases goes a long way. And people in Japan really appreciated it when we were able to interact, say thank you, say that was delicious, something like that. So definitely learn a little bit before you go, but you'll be just fine. Raddick Shepherd wrote in and said, "Hello, Dustin. Real quick question. Did you learn any Japanese for the trip?" And also Isaac Sensei said, "Hello there. I'm curious to hear how your trip was, particularly in regards to the language barrier. You mentioned previously that your wife was spending far more time and effort working to learn Japanese on things like Duolingo than you were. Did that pay off well for her? Did either of you have major difficulties communicating? Did you wish you had attempted to learn the language more? Or did it work out? Any funny mistranslation stories or times Google Translate came through for you in a pinch? Thanks for all you do to make LSM so great to listen to." I probably should have read all three of those at once. Like I said, this is a total grab bag where I tried to put some together and I didn't realize. I will say, as far as major translation or difficulties, like I said, it was really, really accommodating. The only issue I had at one point was there was a guy at a store who was asking me if I needed a bag, which that was an important question because I think to get a bag costs an extra 5 yen or something like that, which is literally maybe 2 or 3 cents USD. But he was asking us, and I thought, I don't know. He like didn't even hold up a bag or anything to try to translate. Like pulled out my phone and tried to like have him say or whatever. And eventually I saw the word bag pop up. I'm like, oh yes, no, I don't need a bag. So there was stuff like that. There was one restaurant that we went to near our Airbnb where our waiter knew a little bit of English, but not a lot. And so we were trying to communicate here and there. And what's funny is I think I have a question about this later. So I might end up I'll re-reference this again later, but I was trying to explain to him, I was like, yeah, we're not into sports, we're gamers, is what I said to him. And he totally understood like gamer and stuff like that. But then I was trying to think of like, what games am I into that he might know? And so I said Final Fantasy. And he had no idea what I was talking about. So I wrote Final Fantasy in Google Translate and he was like, oh, and then he said he had a friend that played Final Fantasy. I was really confused because I knew that Final Fantasy in Japan was said phonetically like in English. And I'm sure I'll get into this later, but I met up with some Last Stand patrons in Kyoto. And I said to one of them, I said, he didn't understand Final Fantasy and I didn't really understand that. And they're like, oh, it's because you didn't say it phonetically, Final Fantasy, like that. And I said, I thought of that, but honestly, it felt kind of like I was like, if I say it out like that, it feels like you're almost saying something like in a racist way, like, oh, I'm trying to make it sound Japanese. And they were like, no. That's what you should have done is spell things out phonetically, which if you do Duolingo, you'll have a lot easier time saying something like Final Fantasy. And if I would have said that, he probably would have understood what I meant. So, but yeah. Google Translate severely or super, super helpful. Particularly, there's a feature on Google Translate where you can hold up your camera and it'll automatically translate a sign live. We use that all the time, just trying to translate different signs, menus, or directions, whatever. We use that all the time. So you definitely gonna have Google Translate on your phone before you go. But yeah, the only other funny instance was I think we were in a place called Toei Park. That's where the giant Evangelion statue is. And a guy that worked there was just greeting people. And he was like, oh, konnichiwa. And I said back to him, I was like, arigato, which just means thanks. So he was like, hello. And I said, thanks. And he was like, oh, arigato. Like he knew that I totally fucked up. I'm like, oh no, I sound like such a fucking idiot. So that was the only time I just guttural instinct said thank you to when a guy said hello to me. But other than that, I was okay. Moving along here. The Bagel Bite Burglar said, did you get beer or sake out of a vending machine? I only saw a few different vending machines that had beer in them. But yeah, you can do that. I want to say, I think the one time I wanted to, but I saw something, this may only apply to the cigarette vending machines that you need to have a Japanese ID, which may be the case also with the beer ones, but I'm not totally sure. Maybe not. I did get a lot of beer from 7-Eleven, and that's going to go into the next question a little bit. But dude, the vending machines are indeed everywhere in Japan, and they are surprisingly very cheap. Like, for the most part, different drinks were usually around 120 yen, which in the conversion right now, the conversion rate, let's just see, 120 yen to USD, that's 80 cents. So definitely a lot better than the $2 you're spending, or maybe even more, at certain US vending machines. So very easy to stay hydrated in Japan, which is very important because it was very, very hot when I was there. But getting back to 7-Eleven, Necrom Oddboy says, "Welcome back, Dustin. So did you get to experience a Japanese 7-Eleven? And if so, what are your thoughts on the higher quality convenience stores there?" So, yeah, convenience stores, particularly in Tokyo, are everywhere. And there's three main brands. There's 7-Eleven, which we have here in the States. There's Family Mart, and there's Lawson. And these, like I said, everywhere. Particularly in one instance, we were at a Family Mart in Tokyo, and we stepped outside, and we could see from this particular spot, we could see 3 additional Family Marts. That's how prevalent these convenience stores, or kombini, are in Tokyo. And these are not like American convenience stores, let me tell you guys. It was really funny. I had a little bit of an issue with my debit card when I first got there. That it's boring. I don't need to explain it. I got it worked out, but I was waiting. I was up the one night. I was waiting for my bank to open in the US so I could try to call them to get it worked out. Like I said, I did. It was no problem. But after I got it working, I knew I wanted to go to the 7-Eleven right near our Airbnb so I could at least attempt to get money out, because I knew by the time I woke up the next day, the bank would have been closed in the US. So I had to go, and Holly was totally asleep by this point. So I texted my dad. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to 7-Eleven right now, get some money out, because he was trying to help me figure things out. He's like, dude, is 7-Eleven just as sketchy there as it is here? And I was like, no. It is pristine. You practically could eat off the floor of a 7-Eleven or any of these stores, really, in most of Tokyo. And so we were at 7-Elevens, Lawson, and Family Mart all the time. Not that we were eating our meals there, but they were great places to get really, really good snacks while you're adventuring around, or drinks, whatever. Great selection of all kinds of interesting drinks, all kinds of beer, cocktails. Highballs are really, really popular in Japan. So there's a huge variety of canned highballs. But one kind of interesting thing about these places is that they have basically hot fried food available, and each of them have their own fried chicken that you can get. It's just like a piece of fried chicken. Particularly at Family Mart, it's called Fami Chiki, and it's so good, and it's so funny to be like, man, I had a delicious fried chicken from a 7-Eleven. But anyone, listen, if you've been to Japan, or you're from Japan, or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. This shit is actually very good. And honestly, I ate at a variety of places, both cheap and quote unquote expensive in Japan. One of the best things I ate was a curry bun from 7-Eleven, which is basically a donut, only not glazed or anything, but just think like fried bread and then delicious Japanese curry on the inside. So good. I was blown away by this. But yeah, we went to 7-Eleven all the time. In fact, so the first place we stayed in Tokyo, there was one that was like a short 3-minute walk down the road. Place we stayed in Kyoto was this hotel that the first floor had a 7-Eleven. And then the final place we stayed one night in the Tokyo Dome Hotel, which is right outside the Tokyo Dome, which is where the baseball team plays in Tokyo. There was a Lawson inside of that hotel. So we were going there all the time. Holly was getting onigiri, which is basically Japanese rice balls that have different either, fish or vegetables on the inside. She was eating those all the time. But yeah, just tons of good, affordable stuff at the Konbini. I know I've talked about this for a while, but I got to tell you how core a part of the experience it was, just going to these and it being a total delight, just figuring out what you're going to find when you're at the Konbini. Towards the end of the trip, I discovered you could buy these JoJo's Bizarre Adventure cards. I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like a pack of cards of JoJo. I'm going to pick one up because they were, I don't know, $1. And I opened it and I realized inside was basically a giant sugar wafer. And then you got one holographic JoJo card. And it's probably a good thing I didn't discover these earlier in the trip, because in the last 2 or 3 days, I probably bought 6 or 7 of them because the cards inside were so cool. So I don't have them up here. I'd show you. But yeah, shout out to the Japanese convenience stores. Josh Gamez says, hey, Dustin, what was the most exotic thing you ate while overseas? And what did you think of it? Thanks in advance and keep on keeping on. You guys know I'm a bit of a bitch. I don't like to eat too much exotic food. I did eat a decent amount of sushi while I was there, but it was all basic stuff. A lot of salmon, a lot of tuna. So I wasn't too adventurous, but it was really, really good. Seriously, it's true what they say. The worst sushi piece I had in Japan was still miles better than anything I've had in the US. Just straight up way, way better. Probably the most exotic thing I ate was the cow tongue, which I know isn't too crazy because I think there's some cow tongue stuff that you can get here in the States. It's not like unheard of. We got the cow tongue that was at the restaurant where they have a little grill on the table and they fry it up in front of you. Didn't like the cow tongue. The taste was fine, but the texture was nasty. Holly is much more adventurous than me. She was eating all kinds of sushi. Particularly, she ate the cuttlefish sushi, and she did not like that. It was like really chewy and weird. So she didn't like that. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I did want to try, speaking of, this is something that came up on Punching Up. I saw a place that was advertising horse meat sashimi. So it was literally just chunks of horse meat. And I thought, now's my time to try the horse meat. But I wanted to try the horse meat, but I didn't want my first time to eat it to be raw. I just didn't. I thought if I see it somewhere where I can get something cooked, I will do the horse meat. I don't want to go straight up and eat raw horse meat. That's a little bit of a step too far. So I didn't end up seeing horse meat later, but I saw a lot more exotic foods that I just was not interested in. When we were outside of this one temple, they were selling these, it almost looks like a giant cracker, like a pancake. But basically what it is, to my understanding, is they take a squid and they just flatten it. Just a big flat squid that you eat. And I'm not interested in that, but it was cool that I saw someone eating it. So that was definitely interesting. But yeah, lots of cool food there, man. So much good food and so affordable too. That's the thing, especially if you are an American going to Japan. Let me tell you, you can eat and drink like a king on a really good budget. Let me tell you, the most expensive meal that Holly and I had was, I had dinner with some industry friends, and it was at this high-rise place in Shibuya. We had this fancy sushi that had like delicious tuna and this fatty tuna pieces. It was so good. We had drinks. I had a dessert of this like matcha cake stuff. So you would expect really expensive, right? Holly and I both had drinks, both had delicious high-end sushi, and it was $60 total. I was like, holy shit, that was the most expensive meal, was $60. We were eating at places for $12 for both of us. The one day we got sushi, it was like it was a standing only counter, these two old guys just making sushi piece by piece. And we ate, I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 pieces. Maybe not. I can't remember how much we ate. It was a lot, and it was $25 or something for just a ton. And we were buying high end, the more expensive sushi, just because it wasn't that expensive. We tried conveyor belt sushi at one point just to try it, even though we knew it was the lower end sushi. We just wanted to try it for the experience. And you could get 2 pieces of tuna sushi. That, again, like I said, it was the worst sushi I had in Japan, but way better than anything I've had here in the US. And they were 100 yen. So we're talking less than 50 cents a piece. So yeah. And the other time we tried to eat fancy too, we went to this pork cutlet, like pork katsu place. And I was like, oh, this is going to be kind of more fancy, more high end. Let's go. And it was, of course, amazing. Again, it was $25 for both of us to eat. So I'm sure there's super high end stuff you could do that you could break the bank. I personally didn't feel that was necessary because everything I was eating was amazing, whether it was cheap or expensive. Like I said, the 7-Eleven 80-cent curry bun was one of the best things I ate there. So yeah, there's just so much great stuff to eat in Japan. It was one of the best parts of the trip. Adrian Pinter has a question who says, you visit one of them hentai stores? I'll keep this brief. You don't need to go to a specific hentai store in Japan because let me tell you, they've got hentai and porn practically everywhere. Particularly the one shocking time for me was I was in a Don Quixote, which Don Quixote is a store. They have them all over Tokyo, all over Japan. And it's a 24-hour place. It's very friendly to foreigners because they have like a whole souvenir section, but a lot of Japanese people go there as well. And they have everything there. Someone at that dinner I was mentioned that it's like a mix of Walmart and Spencer's. And it's weird to wrap your mind around when you're there. You're like, okay, I get it. There's like a lot of weird gifts and stuff, but there's also food, like snacks and a whole drink section. And so I was standing looking at Hello Kitty stuff, and I looked down my right and I could see down the rest of the floor. And there was a small curtain, but I could still see, like, below the curtain, you could see right into the section, and I could clearly see titties from where I was standing. And I'm in the Hello Kitty section, in the Sanrio section. I could see boobs. So seriously, so many of the stores, there was hentai, there was regular, good old fashioned real life porn. It was everywhere. So very interesting cultural thing to just see that all over the place. Boba Sky Killer says, hey, Dustin, I hope you had a great trip. What did you notice as the largest difference in cultural norms between life in Japan versus life in America? Be well. The biggest difference that I noticed in Japan was, and obviously this is very dependent on regional aspects because we spent most of our time in Tokyo and Kyoto. And just between those two cities, I noticed a big difference in overall the culture. But even when I was in Osaka for less than 24 hours, I noticed a difference there too. So I don't want to say this one part of my experience represents all of Japan, but I would say this is an overall thing in that Japanese people, from what I observed, very much mind their own business, and they respect you and your business, and they don't want to bother you. So the one thing that immediately when we got out of the airport and we got onto the train to get to our Airbnb is that I noticed, and this was very particular in Tokyo, a little different in Kyoto, but in Tokyo during the day, it was dead quiet on these trains. Like you could hear a pin drop on these trains. No one blasting a Bluetooth speaker, nobody watching a YouTube video loudly, no one even really talking to each other on these trains. And it was kind of weird. I was like whispering to Holly because I was like, oh, I don't know. It feels like quieter than a library in here, you know? So that was the main thing, is just that people, for the most part, we didn't really talk to anybody in Tokyo outside of people that were serving us or clerks or something. And it didn't really seem like people had very much interest in talking to us. And that was okay with me. The other thing is, and I think this comes down to, I was saying like minding your own business, respecting, trying not to bother other people all the time, just, staying on the right side of the road, trying to walk up and down the correct paths, trying not to bump into people, whatever. But the other thing was just, and I think we touched on this briefly on sacred symbols, is that the level of respect for public places is so much higher there, in that Tokyo is the biggest city I have ever been to. And I've been to, New York, Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure Tokyo is bigger than Los Angeles. But I've been to a lot of the major cities here in the United States. And the overall cleanliness of the city is just almost, I had like called a culture shock moment where I was like, where it is so clean. And what's interesting is that there are no trash cans at all. I don't want to say at all, but when you're walking around Tokyo, there are no trash cans on the street for the most part, like at all. There are no trash, nowhere to put your trash. Yet there is almost no trash in the streets. So if you have garbage, you're expected to carry it with you until you go find a trash can at your next location. You can like peek into one of the convenience stores, throw away your trash in there. That's what I would do. But it was just, it was really shocking. All the subways, very, very clean. All the subway stations, clean. It was really quite amazing. And the other thing too is just that I never felt unsafe in Japan, ever. I never felt like I was in a bad area. I'm sure they exist. And the thing was too is that we stayed in Shinjuku in Tokyo, which is technically, part of it is the red light district, literally where they modeled the Yakuza games after. And we went there, and there's some areas where it seems like there might be some hood rat shit going down, but there's security guys standing around, and it was nowhere near anything that I've seen in Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York or whatever. It was just quite strange. And I mean, in a good way. And it's fun. I couldn't even imagine if you lived in Los Angeles or from San Francisco, and that's where you grew up and spent most of your time and were like normalized by what it was like there, and then going to Tokyo, it must have been like complete shock of what it's like there. So those were probably the largest cultural difference. I had a rude awakening on the way home. As soon as I got on the flight back home to the US, there was people in the row beside us that were talking so loud during when you have a long flight like this. There's technically a lights out portion where they don't serve you any food and they try to keep it dark in the plane and stuff like that. They were talking so loud, and this one girl was complaining. She was like, I'm on a trip and they're telling me I have to leave this restaurant, and I'm with my fiance, and she's seriously almost to the point of crying, talking about how they asked her to leave this restaurant in Japan, because a lot of places they do have time limits. That's kind of like a thing in the US you wouldn't see very often. I didn't go any restaurants like that, but just see this woman crying over it, and so loudly on the plane. I was like, good Lord, coming back to the US. Here we are once again. Moving along here, Shad Vegas says, hey, Dustin, I'd love to hear about your experience with retro games in Japan. What were some cool finds at various shops? I did things a little bit out of order that I wish I would have done differently as far as where I went in Japan to buy retro games. And this was something that was kind of interesting about on Sacred Symbols, that Colin was like, you didn't go to Super Potato in Akihabara. And I was like, no. So I went to a different Super Potato, and let me tell you guys, the prices there were really bad. And that's because it's a tourist place that you hear about. A lot of Americans know, oh, Super Potato, that's where you go to get retro games in Japan. It's like, yeah, so they jack up the prices there. They do have great quality there, particularly, you're going to buy something in nice condition. But so the places I went for games, there was a place I went there's this amazing part of town in Tokyo called Nakano Market, which is this giant marketplace that has it's like these buildings, they have overhead, so you're out of the rain or whatever. But in Nakano Market, there's a place called Nakano Broadway, which is basically a giant shopping mall, which they have normal clothes, whatever, used stores, stuff like that on one level. But the other levels are mostly filled with pop culture, anime, video game stuff. So I got a few finds there. That's where I bought this copy of Mega Man Legends 2 or Rockman Dash 2, along with a few other things. And I want to say that this was, I had the label with how much I paid for it somewhere else. These were a little expensive, ironically, in comparison to some of the other places I bought games. Like this copy, I definitely bought in Nakano Broadway, Nakano Broadway at a game store there, and you can see it cost 1,500 yen, which will do the conversion rate here. I want to be exact. 1,500 yen to USD is $10. And let me tell you, this was one of the most expensive games I bought. And I mean, I know you guys can't see super well over the video version. You're just listening over the audio. The condition is just absolutely pristine. I imagine Mega Man Legends in the US is worth, I want to say that's at least an $80 game. Mega Man Legends 2, over 100. But at those game stores is where I got the worst prices. They were still way better than anywhere in Akihabara, but the best places overall to buy games, and I think I said this on Sacred too, is a place called Book Off, or there's Book Off, which is primarily books and media, but there's also Hard Off, which again, yeah, it's a funny name, Hard Off, but those focus more on hardware and musical instruments and stuff like that. And so some of the stuff I got at Hard Off, I have one of the games I got here at Hard Off, which I saw this game at Nakano Broadway, and it probably was also about $10, but I saw this copy, Crash Team Racing, for the PlayStation 1. And of course, guys, I mean, the condition is just immaculate. And you can see here, 480 yen. Let's do the conversion here, boys. Let's do the conversion. $3. $3 for this totally pristine copy. And let me tell you guys, there were so many things I wanted to buy, but I was trying to make sure that I was conservative with space. And also I just didn't want to blow like a ton of money, right? But you want a boxed copy of Chrono Trigger for the Super Famicom, $25. You know, stuff like that. It was, the prices were just crazy, particularly at Book Off. If you go to Book Off, there's one in Kyoto that's like it's called this Book Off Super Bazaar, that has figures, like rows and rows of used figures, tons and tons of games, and all the prices. There were so many things that I almost bought. You know, copies of Final Fantasy were all under $5. Copies of Resident Evil games or Biohazard in Japan, just as far as the eye can see, cheap video games. So if you are a retro collector, you want to buy some Japanese games, going directly to Japan, obviously the flight is going to be expensive, but when you're there, the amount of stuff that you can buy for so cheap is amazing. I'm going to be going over some of the other games that I bought I guess by the time you guys hear this, the stream will have happened, but I'm going to turn it into that part of the stream into a YouTube video as well. So check that out for more in-depth as far as the different games I bought, because I bought more than just these, but I wanted to have these here just so I could show you guys some of these prices were really, really good. Dylan Yan says, hope you had a great trip, Dustin. How was the food there? Did you eat a lot? Also, hope your trip didn't get impeded by that nuisance IRL streamer. Oh yeah, the Johnny Somali guy. Yeah, I heard about that. I think he got arrested while I was in Japan. But I've heard a little bit about that, and that's super shitty. I realize now I talked a lot about food already, so I guess I'll just say, I'll tell you about, there was this one place we went near our Airbnb that was this tiny little restaurant, which many of the restaurants are in Japan, just very, very small, where you go and you could use your Suica card or, tap to pay, whatever. And you go up to this machine where it shows you all the different food. You press what you want, it prints out a little ticket. You go in, you hand it to a lady. 2 minutes later, you're looking at an entire plate of awesome food. So we went to this place 2 different mornings, And that was one thing is that we realized is that in Japan, kind of, well, at least, again, everything I'm saying is just from my personal experience. So maybe someone from Japan or lives there will say, no, that's not quite right. And so, yeah, please let me know in the comments. But I noticed that there isn't necessarily breakfast food in Japan. There is traditional Japanese breakfast, but a lot of it is pretty like normal food that you would eat at other times during the day. So at this place, what I got was basically like these cold noodles that you would dip into this kind of like sauce that you would eat. And I would also get curry with rice just for breakfast. And it was like $3 or something like that. And it was just this really cool, we were kind of crammed in there with all these salarymen going to work and stuff, but just a nice little homey hole in the wall type place. And that's how you know if it's good. If it seems like too small, and I don't want to say shady, but or run down, because it definitely wasn't either of those, but it definitely felt worn in is maybe a good way to put it. Just a really nice place. Chris Martinez says, Japan has amazing toilets with all the interesting buttons at your disposal. What has become your Japan bum cleaning routine? I don't know if I need to get into the routine, but I will say bidets are everywhere in Japan. Seriously, everywhere. We got off the plane, first bathroom we go to, there's bidets at the airport. Go into a department store, there's bidets there. There are bidets nearly everywhere. There was only maybe one toilet that I didn't see a bidet, and I think it was a public toilet or something like that. And they were all super clean. Every bathroom I went to, very, very clean. Like I said, the only one that was, I don't want to say it was even like super dirty, but it was one that was like a bathroom that you could just I don't want to say on the street, but there was like a small park that had a public bathroom. And there was a little bit of trash, like some bottles in there, but it wasn't by no means like super dirty or anything in there. But yeah, let me tell you, my bum was very happy to have bidets because without being too much TMI, if you're used to having a bidet at home and then you travel, your butt is no longer used to it, to going in dry, as some might say. And so being able to just use a bidet in Japan, 10 out of 10. When I went to Houston for the last event, pain and suffering. So shout out to Japan. The rest of you uncultured swine, get on the bidet train and you'll know what I mean. Josh Harris says, my wife and I are planning a trip to Japan mid next year. Where do you store big bags on the Shinkansen? Also, any tips from one weeb to another dragging their wife across Japan? So Josh brings up the Shinkansen, which many of you know here as the bullet train. And so my recommendation, because we rode the Shinkansen to Kyoto and then back to, to Kyoto and then back to Tokyo. It's about a 3-hour train ride between these two cities. And I want to say the ride cost about, I'm trying to remember if it was 120. I think it was 120 for both Holly and I, so maybe 60 each. My recommendation is that it's very easy to reserve tickets to ride the Shinkansen. And you have two options. There may be more than that, but I noticed there's two main options. There's a regular car and there's the premium car. And the premium car wasn't that much more. I want to say it was maybe $15 to $20 each per person. So we said, fuck it, why not? We rode the premium car on the way there and the regular car on the way back. You get a little more space, a comfier seat. But honestly, the regular car, because it's Japan and everything is nice and clean in Japan, was totally just as fine as well. But if you reserve space, then you'll have dedicated seats that you'll sit at. And just like an airplane where there's the overhead compartment, they have shelves above where you sit where you can put your bags. If you have a really big bag, like a bag that you'd have to check or something like that on a plane, I believe that if you reserve a ticket, there is a designated area where you can put that, usually at the end of a car, that you can put that there and then you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, plenty of space on the Shinkansen and a really just nice experience doing that. I highly recommend riding those trains just because it's cool. You're going super fast. You get to look at the Japanese countryside. You can get a bento box, which is like a kind of a fancy lunch that you can eat while you're on it. Grab a beer because you can drink anywhere in Japan. So I had a beer on the Shinkansen on the way home. And the main thing I would say is just reserving your tickets so then you can know you have these two seats. Particularly on the way back, there were the two rows. One side had two seats and the other one had three. So because I reserved, I was able to get two seats where Holly and I, we could just be on our own. We didn't have to sit by anybody that we didn't know or anything like that. And super easy to reserve those. And I also got to say, I recommend, I didn't get into this earlier, but not everything, but all of your travels are powered through a Suica card, which is basically this card that you can reload money on. And currently, and maybe if you go to Japan, this won't be the case, but there is a shortage of Suica cards. So you can't just go and get one as a foreigner. But if you have an iPhone, you can get a digital Suica card, which I highly, highly recommend. It's really easy to do. Just look up a YouTube video about how to set up a digital Suica. And then when you get on and off in the train, you just wave your phone over it and then you get through. You can reload it as long as you use an Apple Card or a MasterCard. It's really easy to reload. But getting back to the Shinkansen is that when you sign up for your tickets on the website, you can plug in your Suica. So you plug in your Suica number and then you just show up at the station and you just wave your phone over and it automatically detects that you have a Shinkansen ticket. So, dude, I felt like I was living in 2050, walking in, didn't need to go up to any kiosk to print out my ticket or anything. Just wave your phone over, 10 out of 10. So if you do the research and do those things in advance, you're going to have a very easy time. Though I'm sure printing out your ticket would be easy because all of those kiosks and stuff have, English options if you need it. So as far as dragging your wife around, if you go to places that have a mix of everything, you'll be easy. The number one place in Tokyo for shopping that I would recommend is Nakano Market / Nakano Broadway, because there will be all of the weeb stuff and video game stuff that your heart could ever desire, and many other places for your wife to go that you can be in the same building, but exploring and doing your own stuff. Okay. Aki Bavanya says, what was the golden rule when it came to spending money on collectibles? Was there any must-have that you just couldn't bear to spend the money on, or anything you just couldn't pass up getting? Also, did you spot or buy any interesting, weird, goofy gachapons? So as far as spending money on collectibles, let me tell you, if you are a weeb or into video games, it's very easy to spend a lot of money in Japan, because even though everything is so cheap, you just want to buy more stuff. And you got to be conscious about how much room you have to take stuff home. You can pay to ship stuff home too, as well, through Japan Post or whatever. But the golden rule, I would just say, is to not go to Akihabara first. I would do that later and hit some of the cheap spots first, whether it's going to a book off or a resale shop or Nakano Broadway, like I said, where there's tons of different used stuff. This is the thing about used in Japan, is that Japanese people just treat their stuff way better than we do. And so all of the used figures I got are in really, really good condition, and they were a fraction of the cost of the stuff in Akihabara. So go to these used places first, get the things you want, and then if you have to pay a premium later, then do it. But there was a few instances where I got a figure, or I, bought something, and then I realized, I'm like, damn, I could have got a nicer figure used that's in just a good condition if I would have went to these other places first. And there's a big culture around keeping the box nice in Japan too, which if you're traveling, you probably are going to throw away the box, which that's what I did in all cases but one. There's one box that I kept, which watch the video that I'm going to put out to see which box I kept. But all the other figures I bought either came in a bag because they were loose, or I opened the box and threw it away because it just there's so much air in those boxes. You got to throw it out. You got to, in order to make room for more stuff. So the golden rule is go used first. KBR Sports says, "Hey Dustin, hope you had a great trip, man. I'm really dying to know about how popular Dragon Ball is in Japan. I know it's huge in the West and was arguably the anime that made anime cool in the West. Very curious how our counterparts East Side feel about it, and how is it remotely as popular." I read this weird. Hold on. Very curious how our counterparts East Side feel about it, and is it remotely as popular there as it is here? Again, I want to read the next question too, because these tie together. Captain Bon Clay says, "Howdy, Dustin. Me and my friends will be going to Japan next fall, and my white whale is a Bon Clay figure from Japan. What was the state of One Piece merch in Japan? Did you get any One Piece merch?" So, talking about different anime being popular and not popular in Japan, this was something that was really interesting to me because there's certain anime here in the US that is more popular in Japan, and there's stuff in Japan that is more popular there that is not popular here at all, or not as popular. I would say the big stuff, for example, KBR, you mentioned Dragon Ball. There was a lot of Dragon Ball Z stuff all over the place, a lot of Dragon Ball Z figures everywhere. It seems like that is just as popular there as it is here. Demon Slayer was really big there, which is really big here. Jujutsu Kaisen I saw all over the place as well. What was interesting was a lot of some older anime not really present outside of some of these used shops in particular. Like, maybe I wasn't looking hard enough, but I barely saw any Cowboy Bebop stuff at all. I barely saw any Akira stuff when I was there. Barely saw any Berserk stuff. I saw some here and there, but it wasn't wildly available all over the place. So, and dude, and the other interesting thing, I confirmed some of my suspicions. And I heard that this was more popular in Japan, but it's kind of waning now, which may be the truth here in the US. But My Hero is definitely more popular in the US, I think, than in Japan. So that kind of makes sense, I think, with the superhero stuff. This is an aside. One thing I did notice that is worth bringing up was I noticed that there is a culture of, or I guess a subculture of Japanese people that love American stuff. I don't know if there's a name for these people, but in Nakano Broadway, the place I've mentioned a million times now, there are specific stores that are for American IPs like Marvel, Star Wars stuff all around that. Even some that were like American retro stuff. That was kind of interesting to see that. Now, Captain Bon Clay, as far as One Piece, guys, this was the dream. You know why? Everyone loves One Piece in Japan, and it is everywhere in Japan. There is One Piece stuff in nearly all the, I don't want to say it's not quite as popular as something like Pokemon or Hello Kitty merchandise, but the thing I noticed particularly when we went to Universal Japan, which they had like this special One Piece thing going on, is that we went to this One Piece show in the water world, and there were kids there. There were adults there. There just every wide range. It seems like or One Piece is universally appealing to people in Japan, which is crazy because it's been around for, a few decades now, but everyone seems to love One Piece. The waiter that I mentioned we were talking to, we were talking to him about some different anime we like. He's like, oh yeah, he said he really liked One Piece, and we brought up, we're like, oh yeah, we're in Dressrosa right now. And he's like, oh, Dressrosa. Like, he knew exactly what we were talking about. So One Piece, really popular. I'm trying to think if I saw a Bon Clay figure. I'm sure, dude, there's figures everywhere of all different characters. There were weird, obscure One Piece characters that I saw small little figurines of. So I'm sure if you're looking around, there are a million figure places you can buy figures. I'm sure you will find a Bon Clay figure somewhere. But yeah, or also you got to go to the Mugiwara store. Dedicated stores for One Piece. It's amazing. It's 10 out of 10. Jack writes in, says, Dustin, my girlfriend and I make the interminable flight. Is that how you say that word? I don't know, guys. I'm an idiot. Flight to Japan in a month or so. What were the things you were told were must do in Japan that didn't live up to the hype? What would you recommend after having been there? We're going to Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. Cheers, Jack. So the one thing I would say is that, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is that before I went, I had a lot of recommendations of you have to eat here. You got to eat at this place for ramen. You got to go to this restaurant. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm basic, but I found amazing food everywhere to the point where it didn't matter if it was expensive or cheap. I thought that pretty much everything was delicious. And sure, that some of that is just because I'm eating something different and abnormal than I would normally eat. And I fully acknowledge that. But I wouldn't feel the need to have a set list of all these different restaurants, because some of the best places we found were just places we just happened to find walking around. The other thing I'll say is that don't go nuts seeing shrines and temples. Definitely go to them because they're very cool. But a lot of them, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's kind of like once you've seen a few of them, you're kind of good. There's not too much variation in the shrines and temples. So don't feel the need that you need to see every temple and shrine that someone tells you need to go to. So, but yeah, my recommendation is don't have too much of an itinerary and, take it easy. Because let me tell you, the amount, I've said that a lot. Let me tell you, this is probably really annoying. I'm going to not say that for the rest of the episode. The thing that I wasn't fully prepared for, even though I knew that this was probably going to be the case to some degree, is that I walked so much in Japan. I looked at on my phone, there's the health app that has a pedometer in it. It'll tell you how far you walked. We averaged walking 10 miles a day. And so I even was prepared and bought special walking shoes before I left because I knew we were going to be walking. But before you go, Jack, start training, start prepping, because you will walk probably more than you're used to in Japan. Start training. I did a little bit on the bike before I went, which probably helped a little bit, but I wish I had trained more, because basically it got to the point in the first few days where I had blisters on my feet because I was walking so much. My legs, I felt like I was dying. So a few times, 1 or 2 times, you just go back to the hotel, recharge for a little bit, or the Airbnb or whatever. Just, I would lay there 20, 30 minutes, then you're good to go out. And about 3 days in, I'd become one with the pain. And so I no longer, it still was very tiring, and I was, my feet didn't feel great, but eventually I just got used to it. So be prepared to walk a lot. Let's see. Eric asked a question about Jujutsu Kaisen, and I realized that I already touched on that. It's everywhere. There's a special 3D or I guess 4D experience at Universal for Jujutsu Kaisen. We did that. I've only seen 1 episode of it. I don't have anything against it. I just have not seen much about it, but yeah, maybe I'll have to check out more of that. Let's see. Josh Correa says, "Hey Dustin, welcome back from Japan. Street Fighter style voice." Oh, I missed that. Sorry. A simple question: have you stayed in any capsule hotels or internet/anime cafe? No, we didn't. The one place we did stay was in Kyoto. It was called Hotel Tabanos, which you can look up on Google or whatever. And it's not a capsule hotel by any means, but it's more in that direction, in that you go to this place, they have all the amenities for you. They have, what am I looking for? Pajamas. Yeah, they have pajamas you can sleep in. They have different slippers you wear and stuff like that. You get your own room, a whole room, but there's literally, you walk in, you have a tiny little hallway, and to your right, you've got a small bathroom that has a shower, toilet, sink, stuff like that. And then in your room, it's just your bed and a tiny little place to sit. And that's it. That's all you get. So not quite a capsule hotel, but this place was awesome. I highly recommend staying there if you stay in Kyoto. I think they have locations in Tokyo as well, but Hotel Tabanos, really nice area where they have coffee for free, drinks. They have a whole manga section if you want to read manga, but it was all in Japanese, so I couldn't do that. But really, really nice place that was only $80 a night. So if you don't need anything fancy, if you don't, and here's the thing, you're in Japan, you're not going to be hanging out in your hotel for very much. You might as well get a cheaper place that's nice, that, all you really need is a place to sleep, to shit, to shower, and you're good. So highly recommend staying at a place like that. Neo JD writes in and says, how many panties did you buy? But seriously, did you get exposed to any new media you'd like to introduce to the rest of us? So no, I did not buy any panties, but I did see the used panty vending machine. I did see one of those. They do exist. Was not interested in purchasing one, but it was very interesting to see one. I don't know if I got exposed to any new media while I was there. I did watch sumo on TV when we were getting into our Airbnb the one night, just laying there while Holly was taking a shower watching sumo wrestling, which was kind of cool. But yeah, I don't think I saw any types of new media. Definitely learned culturally all kinds of different things like characters and learning about I guess confirming things that I thought were true but wasn't for sure about. For example, in Persona 4 Golden, everyone knows there's Junes, which is the grocery store, department store, whatever, that comes to town. And the your little stepsister in the game, she loves the song that plays, the "Every Day's Great at Your Junes." Well, stores in Japan have those little jingles that play while you're at them. Both Don Quixote and Book Off both had special jingles that would play that were very, very fun. So that was pretty cool. Emmett writes in and says, hey, Dustin, I'm going to be in Korea soon and I'm extremely anxious about the flight. How did you keep yourself occupied for that long stretch of time? Thanks. So riding in coach definitely is not fun, but it's not that bad either, I would say. I was specifically trying to keep in mind sleeping in order to try to get past jet lag, particularly on the way there. So I actually bought melatonin gummies and tried to knock myself out on the way there, which definitely helped. I'm not very good at sleeping on planes, particularly if you're in coach, which I've only ever ridden in coach my whole life. It's very hard when you're sitting up trying to sleep, but mainly just through sleeping and having a variety of things to do. You don't want to bring just, oh, I'm going to play my Switch, or, oh, I'm just going to watch movies on an iPad. Bring a variety of things. And that helped quite a bit because I played Sea of Stars for a few hours. And then I watched some stuff that I had preloaded on my iPad, which was really helpful. And then read some stuff, whatever. Just bring a variety of things. Make sure you're getting up, going to the bathroom. And if you're on a long flight like that, it should include meals, which even if they're not very good, at least it's something to do, is to eat weird food on planes. Nothing I ate on those planes was bad. In fact, first meal I had on the plane was actually fire. I couldn't believe it. It was the first time I had airplane food since 2002 when I went to Paris when I was in second grade. And I brought around these little packets that had butter chicken in it with rice. This shit was really, really good. I couldn't believe it. And it was the peak, unfortunately. The peak was at the very beginning because after that, the food kind of went downhill. The second thing was these waffles, which were okay, maybe a little soggy. And then other food we had was just not very good. Ivory State writes in and says, hey, Dustin, did you encounter any interesting non-anime / video game historical or cultural sites or facts during your trip? If so, please share. So yeah, it wasn't all just gaming and anime and degeneracy, stuff like that while we're there. We did go to some temples. Probably the most interesting one that I went to was in Kyoto. That was the Fushimi Inari Shrine, which basically is the one, if you've probably seen photos of it, where there is a million torii gates all the way up an entire mountain, hundreds of torii gates. And so we planned on going, and we knew that we were going to be, there was like this section that you had to climb uphill or whatever. We weren't expecting to climb up an entire mountain. We're talking giant staircases, a very, very long trek up. In fact, let's see, climb. I'm looking up the hike to the summit of 233 meter. I guess so, 233 meters. How hard is it to climb Fushimi Inari? Not too hard if you take it slow. 5-kilometer hike. Yeah, this shit was really hard. It was really, really hot outside, very humid. We did make it to the very top, and you get a great view of Kyoto. And so, yeah, that was really fun. Again, not expecting to how high we were going to go up, but it was really fun. We also went to, let me see if I can find it on the map here. I have Google Maps open trying to remember the different places we went to. There is a bamboo forest in Japan, in Kyoto, that we went to that was very, very cool. I want to say it was on the west side. Maybe it was, this looks like the Arashiyama Bamboo Grove, I think, is the one we went to, that was very, very beautiful. Super cool to be in a bamboo forest like that. So we went to a few different shrines also in Tokyo. The one kind of reminded me, gave me a similar feeling of being almost like Central Park in New York City. Not that it looked like that, but you are in the middle of Tokyo. And the shrine was the, let me see here, Meiji Jinju Shrine, where you're in the middle of Tokyo. You are just north of Shibuya, and you go in this path, and you go, and then suddenly you're like in a forest, and there's this temple in the middle of the forest, and you're still deep in Tokyo, yet you're in this surrounded by nature at the same time. And there's a beautiful beautiful gardens that you can walk through there. So that was very, very cool. Some of these parks were really, really nice in Japan. Let's see here. Who is next? Okay, so Dylan, sorry, I was going to read your question, but it looks like I already covered that. Okay, here's a fun one. Urchant says, "Hi, Dustin. Last week, out of the blue, my 10-year-old son asked if he could subscribe to Crunchyroll. I asked what he wanted to watch, and it was My Hero Academia. Should I now be concerned he will turn into a weeb? He hasn't been exposed to anime other than Fortnite skins and maybe Pokemon. All seriousness, though, do you have any anime recommendations for a 10-year-old? Kind regards." Anime recommendations for a 10-year-old. Well, of course, for kids, you got to recommend Studio Ghibli stuff. Spirited Away. Princess Mononoke is my favorite of those movies, so I highly recommend those, and I'm sure will be into that. I know it's obvious, but One Piece is perfect, especially for 10-year-olds, because I know that it has like this reputation of being a very fan service anime, and it is, but if he gets into it now, in like, as he watches it over the years, he will grow into it being a more mature anime. Not that I'm saying it's mature, it sounds a little bold, but yeah, definitely those are two good recommendations. Holly is texting me. Oh, she's taking Frisk for a walk. Okay, no big deal. So yeah, he doesn't need to watch Attack on Titan quite yet. At 10 years old, though, I mean, maybe he's all right. If it depends on what you're okay with as far as violence or whatever. Attack on Titan, though, rules if he's interested in something like that. Dan Excel writes, "Hey, Dustin, welcome back. Are you thinking about going back to Japan anytime within the next few years? Are there places you couldn't get to? Go to? Did you go to the island of Tsushima?" No, we did not go to the island of Tsushima. That would have been a pretty far trek for us to go. We definitely would absolutely love to go back. We were there 10 days, and while it was a long vacation to do 10 days, it felt short because there were so many things that we didn't get to do. We didn't even get to really explore all of Tokyo. That's how big it is. There were tons of sections of Tokyo that we didn't get to go to. And the three areas that we went to being Tokyo, Kyoto, and we were in Osaka for just part of a day, those are like the main tourist hubs. So next time that we go, we definitely want to take time to go to some of the smaller, more countryside areas of Japan just to check out what it's like living, more outside of the big cities. So we didn't get to do that this time. We kind of did the standard tourist route, but next time I'd love to go up north to like Hokkaido and stuff. That would be super cool. But yeah, we would absolutely love to go back. It's tough. Going away for 10 days definitely took a lot of collaboration, and I have to give a super huge shout out and thanks to both Ben and Locke who covered for me while I was gone. I'm sure that was not an easy task, and it's very, very much appreciated that they were able to do that. So yeah, hopefully again at some point. I have no idea when. Joseph Baker says, welcome back, Dustin. I'd love to take a trip with my wife and son, but I have no idea where to begin the planning. So the question is, where do I start? Any tips or suggestions would be fantastic. Yeah, Holly and I did tons and tons and tons of research and prep, and most of that was just through watching YouTube videos, which is basically how you learn to do anything now. But I was overwhelmed when I initially started researching. Like, I thought, oh no, like, where do you stay? How do I book somewhere? And I had no reason to be stressed at all because everything is so much easier than I expected. As far as if you want to save some cash, go to Airbnb. You can find some great places, very affordable. For the most part, all of those are going to be available to you in English. So that'll be no problem. If you're with your family, maybe even staying at some hotels, if you want to spend a little more money, that might be a good option too. They will speak English for the most part at hotels. And everything else too was surprisingly much easier than I expected. The trains, as long as you have Google Maps on your phone, really, really easy to navigate and get around. Very, very cheap to get around on these trains too. We're talking fares of 300 yen, which is like $1.80 maybe for per trip, sometimes cheaper than that, depending on how far you're going. To go from Kyoto to Osaka was $5, I think. And these are two cities that are not very close. It took an hour and a half. It's $5 to get between the two of them, which is, insane as far as the pricing. But watching a lot of YouTube videos, figuring out where you want to stay, figuring out which airport you want to fly into, stuff like that. It's definitely a lot to take in at once, but I wouldn't worry about it too much as long as you just take the time to investigate and learn these different things. Learn about getting the Suica card on your phone. One thing that I didn't discover until I was there, and luckily Holly knew this and I didn't, but she knew immediately, is there's a thing that you legally must keep your passport on you while you're in Japan. This is a law, because if the police can stop you for any reason at all, if they just want to, and they will ask you for your passport. I was not stopped at all. So I don't want to make it sound like they've got the Gestapo out there asking for your papers all over the place, but you want to make sure you have your passport. And also because if you spend over 5,500 yen at certain stores, you can get it tax-free, and you need to present your passport in order to do that. So that's going to be very important. But yeah, YouTube. And as always, if you go into the Last Stand Discord, ask around. There's many people that have been to Japan. There are some people that live in Japan that would be perfectly happy to help and recommend different things to you. Okay, moving along here. Josh Kiscalt said, Dustin, I'm 38 years old and my son is 11. We were talking about making a trip, just him and I, to experience Tokyo. After traveling there, do you feel that this would be a worthy and safe trip to take? How much money per day do you think I would be spending on the two of us? Thanks again and welcome back. Well, Josh, I mentioned earlier, safety is, I guess anything is possible anywhere, but I honestly felt safer in Japan than pretty much I do at home, which I feel pretty safe here in small town Western PA. But depending on where you live, I guess that could be a thing. But I really wouldn't worry about the safety aspect at all. As far as money, it just really depends on how much you want to spend. It's nice because you can eat really good food and not worry about spending a lot of money. And also transportation, as I said a few minutes ago, very cheap. That's kind of where the big difference is. Thinking about the trips I've taken to Los Angeles or Boston or whatever, it's like you got to fly there. That's a big expense. You got to get around there, and you either take public transportation, which is shitty, stinky, and more expensive, or you take Uber and Lyft everywhere, and that's really expensive. And then everywhere you eat is going to be expensive. And that's just not the case for Tokyo and other parts of Japan as well, where you can get around really cheap. You can have great meals for cheap. So I don't know if I can put an exact dollar amount on that, but I'll say that I spent a lot of money on souvenirs and stuff to bring home and had a couple nicer meals. And I came back under budget for this trip. Makeshift Money says, did you try Koko Ichibanya? I would consider a return trip back just to eat there for a week. Yes, I did. So Koko Ichibanya is a curry restaurant, and this is a chain. So I'm sure Japanese people, if you told them that you were excited to eat there, maybe would roll their eyes or something like that. But it's really, really good. I had an expensive meal there that was chicken katsu with curry. I think it was, I don't know, 1,000 yen or something. So $8. It was just a ton of food that was really good. So yeah, check out even these chain places. Really, really good. Dion DeLisa says, hey, Dust, please tell us about your experience in Nintendo World theme park. I'd especially like to know about the food and the Mario Kart ride. So I mentioned earlier, you went to Universal, which you can go to Nintendo World. Nintendo World was awesome. Definitely the scenery is, of course, the most amazing part. If you've seen any of the videos or photos out of there, I guess this should be obvious, but the park is definitely geared more towards kids. You can tell that Nintendo had a hand in designing it because there are these small activities that you can do around the park that will require you to have one of these bands here. I have the band over here. Here it is. So that's how they get you. Getting into Universal and getting into Nintendo World, not that expensive. I want to say it was $60, which compared to a US theme park is really cheap. They get you because if you really want to enjoy Nintendo World, you got to get one of these bands, which you sync with an app on your phone, and you can then go and do all kinds of cool stuff around the park, these different activities. You collect things, you get these badges. But anyway, these cost, I want to say, a little less than $30 each. So again, this is how they get you. Is they make you get this badge thing too. But it was worth it because that was one of the main things we wanted to do while we were in Japan, is go to Nintendo World, which I know there's the US version, but obviously, dude, if you're in Japan, you got to go to the OG Nintendo theme park. The Mario Kart ride was awesome. The queue was very cool because the queue takes place in Bowser's Castle. The ride was all right. It has this whole AR feature where you can see other Mario characters racing alongside you. I found that to be kind of distracting because I wanted to see the different stuff around the ride. So the ride was all right. Overall, though, just being in the park and seeing all these different life-size Mario things all over the place, amazing. I absolutely loved it. Don't necessarily need a whole day there. We were there, unfortunately, on a public holiday. I didn't realize that till after I booked the tickets, which was a little annoying. So it was a little busier than normal, but we still got to do everything in the Mario or in the Nintendo World other than the Yoshi ride, which is more of a kid's ride anyway. But yeah, we didn't get any food while we were there. There's a whole Toad Cafe, or as they call in Japan, his name is Kinopio. There's a whole cafe there. We didn't need to do that. We ate at the One Piece themed cafe earlier in the day, so we didn't end up doing that. But yeah, the Mario World, especially, man, if you're there with kids, they're going to love it. Or if you're just a huge dork like me, you're going to love it as well. Let's see. Okay, Death by Clams, you asked about figures. I think we already talked about that, so we'll skip that. Let's see. We talked about hotel, must-go places. I wrote down, there were so many good questions at the time that I realize now I've covered almost all of this. So, here's an interesting one we haven't gone over. Nevitt says, Konnichiwa, Dustin. Wow, when walking around, did you see any Xbox or Sonic the Hedgehog representation? Hope you were able to get some rest and get over the jet lag. Yeah, very little Sonic stuff, and the Xbox stuff was definitely eye-opening in that we went to a few electronic department stores. These are basically like almost like a Best Buy, but bigger and multiple floors, just giant floors filled with stuff. So I would go to the video game section of these, and I'll be honest, I'm not saying they don't exist. I know they still exist. One of the guys from Digital Foundry, he's in Japan right now. I saw that he posted that he saw an Xbox section. I did not see a single new Xbox section anywhere. No Xbox anywhere. I saw Steam Deck and I saw the ROG Ally have different sections, but did not see an Xbox section. The only time I saw Xbox stuff was at used stores, and at the one hard off, you could buy a used Xbox Series S and an Xbox One X. But that was it. So it definitely brought a different context to people talking about Japan and Xbox, because they really don't give a fuck about Xbox pretty much at all there. At least from what I could tell, they don't even sell it at some of the main big stores. So that's that was a bit eye-opening. I think, let me see, there's someone asking about drinks, and Raul Hernandez, we'll go over this. Hi, Dustin. Just wanted to know how much was your trip, and did you pass by the red light district of Tokyo? And also any bad experience you had there. The red light district, like I said, we stayed right nearby, and it was nowhere near as shady or nefarious as I thought it was going to be. There is a good general rule of thumb that you should be careful of. There are tourist scams there that I've heard about where they'll come in, they say, oh, you want a free drink? And then you go in and they'll secretly charge you for a bunch of different drinks. They'll give you like one free drink, and then everything else they'll charge you a super high amount. There is a story, I don't know if you guys know about Abroad in Japan, this YouTube channel, where someone went to one of these things with his wife and got drugged, and there was a whole thing involving a prostitute. So there's definitely, it's not all perfect in Japan. Absolutely not. But if you're smart and don't do any of these scams or fall for any of these scams, you're going to be totally fine. When I was there, I never had, no one offered me to come in and try to go to a specific restaurant or hail me down or anything like that. I'm sure it does happen, but it didn't happen to Holly and I. So just be careful, be smart. If there's something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. There's probably no free drinks in Shinjuku, I'm guessing. So don't do anything like that. I think that will about cover it. I'm looking at some of the other questions. I don't want to repeat myself more than I already have. So I guess the only thing that I would say that I didn't cover low key, I went to Universal for Super Nintendo World, but the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, 10 out of 10. Amazing place. There's a ride there, which is not a new ride, and they have this at the US. It's called Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Was one of the most amazing rides I've ever been on in my entire life. The queue, you go into the castle, you go through, you're in Dumbledore's office. It was really funny because we were at the Japan one, so Dumbledore's speaking to you in like dubbed Japanese, which was really fun. And this ride, it's like a mix of simulators where it's making you feel like you're flying over Hogwarts, but then it's also part like a Disney ride with animatronics, with dementors and dragons and stuff, that they're blowing hot air on you or making it feel like the dementors are sucking your soul out and stuff like that. It was so cool. And the Harry Potter world, just in general, one of the things I loved about it is that you have to go through this long pathway through almost like a little forest to get to into the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And what was weird is that there's no sign. Basically, you're walking through Universal. You walk through, I think it's the Jaws world. Maybe it's after that. But anyway, you're through normal Universal stuff. And then there's this area to the side where they have a bunch of giant, weird looking rocks. But there's no sign for the Harry Potter world. They just are like, hey, there's some weird shit going on here. Come on back. We got Harry-kun back here. And when you're in there, it's very cool. I watched a video about this beforehand, is that apparently J.K. Rowling was very specific that she wanted the Harry Potter world to be fully immersive. So she didn't want there to be, you're in Hogsmeade and you go and there's a giant Coca-Cola sign or something like that. And they're very particular about this, to the point where I noticed when I went, I got one of the butter beers from one of the carts. They basically have all of the cashier's stuff behind a curtain, and they lift it up and use your card and stuff like that, and take it away. They really, really try to make it fully immersive while you're there. And you can tell it's very, very cool. So I think that's it for this Japan mailbag. I will be in the comments of this video. If you have any other questions that I didn't go over, feel free to ask them. Happy to respond. And thanks, guys, for listening. I'm very thankful that I was able to go on this trip. Oh, I guess the question, how much did I spend? I honestly don't know how much I spent. I had accounted for, I want to say, I accounted for a lot more. I don't know if I feel weird saying how much. I guess you would expect this trip to cost like $10,000 or $8,000 or something. It was way less than that. I want to probably say that with flights and hotels and everything, it was probably around maybe $3,500 for this trip or something. Maybe it was more than that. I'm trying to think, because our flights were around $850 a piece, which I understand is very cheap. Normally they're closer to $1,000 or $1,200. So that was good. Each night was an average of $80 to $90 a night staying there. And then all the stuff that we bought, all the food was really cheap. So I had way more planned in my budget for this trip than I actually spent, which was great. So yeah, you can obviously do it more expensive. You want to go there first class, you want to buy more expensive food, you can do that. But the most expensive part is going to be your plane ticket getting there, which I'm guessing will be over $1,000 in most cases. But if you do shop around, go there at the right time, I'm sure seasonal, where you fly out of is very important. We had looked at flying out of DC instead of Pittsburgh. And if we had flown out of DC, it would have been $1,200. Flying out of Pittsburgh, $800. No idea why. And also it depends on when you book, because I was looking at Google Flights just because I was curious. If basically from now until March, it's around $800, but right after March, it spikes up over $1,000. So if you're looking to buy in advance, you might want to wait to buy tickets because you might save some money that way. But anyway, that was a side tangent before, as I was finishing up the episode. Very thankful to all of you that support us and, like the work that we do that enables us to do this for a living and also enabled me to do this trip. I super, super appreciate it. So thank you guys. And thank you, of course, for being a patron and listening to this episode of Sacred Symbols Plus. We'll be back whenever, of course, guys. We're always making new episodes for you. We never miss, knock on wood. Hopefully we haven't missed yet. I don't think. If we ever miss, we usually make it up in some way to you. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. And we'll see you later. Goodbye.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.